I'm Dave Cook from the Monitor. Our guest is Bernie Sanders, Senator from Vermont and presidential candidate. This is his first visit with our group, and we thank him for coming. He was born in Brooklyn, graduated from the University of Chicago, and in 1968 moved to Vermont, where he initially worked as a carpenter and later as a writer. Our guest's first foray into politics was unsuccessful when he ran for the United States Senate in '72 on the Liberty Union Party candidate ticket. He made several other tries for statewide office before being elected mayor of Burlington in 1981. He went on to serve 4 terms in that post. In 1990, he was elected Vermont's at-large member of the U.S. House and served there until he won a seat in the Senate in 2006. He was overwhelmingly reelected in 2012. Thus ended the biographical portion of the program. Now on to the ever so compelling recitation of ground rules. As always, we're on the record here. Please, no live blogging or tweeting. In short, no filing of any kind while the breakfast is underway to give us time to actually listen to what our guest says. There's no embargo when the session ends. To help you curb that relentless selfie urge, we will email several pictures of the session to all the reporters here as soon as the breakfast ends. As regular attendees know, if you'd like to ask a question, please do the traditional thing and send me a subtle, non-threatening signal, and I'll happily call on as many reporters as we can in the time we have with the senator this morning. I'm going to hold myself to one question and suggest you might want to do the same so that more reporters can get a question. We're going to start off by offering our guests the opportunity to make some opening comments. Then we'll move to questions from around the table. And with that, sir, thanks again for doing this.
Well, David, thank you very much for inviting me, and let me thank all of you for being here this morning for what I hope will be a serious and fruitful discussion about some of the major issues facing our country. It is no great secret that the United States of America today faces some enormous problems. What I intend to do during this campaign is to talk about those problems and to talk about why it is that despite huge increases in productivity and technology, the American middle class continues its 40-year decline, while at the same time we are seeing a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality, such that today 99% of all new income is going to the top 1%, and the top 0.1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That inequality is, in my view, immoral, it is unsustainable, and it is certainly not what this country is supposed to be about. Later on this morning, I'm going to be holding a press conference on Capitol Hill, and I want to just review with you some of what I will be talking about. I will be talking about family values, but not the family values that my Republican colleagues talk about, which for them means that a woman should not have the right to control her own body, or that gay people should not have the right to get married, or that women should not have access to contraception. That is their concept of what family values are about. That's not my concept. What my concept of family values is about is that the United States should not be the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave when a woman has a baby. So that right now we are seeing a situation where a woman is having a baby and a week later is forced to go back to work because she doesn't have the income to stay at home and bond with her child. Every psychologist who studies this issue understands the most important years of a human being's life are the first weeks and months of that life. And the idea that women and fathers cannot stay home to bond with their little babies is, to me, not what family values is about. And I am supporting Senator Gillibrand's legislation that will provide 12 weeks of medical and family leave. Second point, it is again beyond comprehension that the United States of America, our great nation, is the only major nation on earth that does not guarantee sick leave, paid sick leave for our working people. So that today, in McDonald's and Burger King and all over this country, there are people who are sick, who are going to work, who are handling our food, who should be at home. There are mothers who are sending their kids to school because they don't have paid sick leave in order to stay home and take care of their kids. That is a family value. That when a husband comes down with cancer, a wife has a right to spend some time with him at home and be able to do so. That's a family value. And last but not least, an issue that we talk about very, very rarely is the fact that because of a disappearing middle class, because of the fact that millions of Americans are working longer hours for lower wages, we end up working among major industrialized countries. Our people work the longest hours of any people on earth. Some of you may remember reading in textbooks, and I remember this very clearly, photographs of workers 100 years ago in the early 1900s. And they held up placards that said, give us a 40-hour work week. Remember that? 40-hour work week. So they want time off for leisure, for education, to be with their families. Today, there are millions of workers who still do not have a 40-hour work week. And we are the, again, only major country on earth that does not guarantee vacation time for workers. And I'll be introducing legislation, I think, today, which will guarantee 10 days of vacation time for American workers. So what I'm saying today is that at a time of a disappearing middle class, at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, that our government has got to start paying attention to the needs of working families in this country. And that means when a mother has a baby, she should not be forced back to work because she doesn't have enough money to stay home. When somebody is sick, they should not be forced to go to work. And that a family in this country should have the right to spend a couple of weeks together rather than not having any vacation time at all. So bottom line is, we've got to join other major countries around the world in protecting our families. And that's something I'll be talking about later today.
Thank you on that. Let me just talk about where we're going to go first. David Jackson, USA Today, Ken Thomas of AP, Andy Glass of Politico, Jamie Weinstein of Daily Caller, Jose Del Real of The Post, Linda Feldman of The Monitor, Ed Henry of Fox, Alex Thompson of The New York Times, Sahil Kapoor of Bloomberg, AFP's Ivan Carone, and Anna Mulrine of The Monitor. David, let's start with you.
Senator Sanders, there's been some question about your party affiliation. I believe you've run as a socialist before.
No.
No? Well, that's why I'm asking the question. I mean, are you a socialist, are you a Democrat, or are you an independent? How would you describe yourself?
I have won elections in Vermont in every instance as an independent. Since my first day in the United States Congress in 1991, I have caucused with the Democratic Party. Obviously, right now, I'm the ranking member representing the Democrats on the Budget Committee. I am a candidate for President of the United States within the Democratic primary and caucus process, and will abide by all of the rules and regulations of that party in every state. Philosophically, if your question is, am I a democratic socialist, and do I think we have a lot to learn from countries like Denmark and Sweden and Norway and Finland and other countries that over the years have had labor or social democratic governments? Yes, I am.
Why do people call you a socialist?
Well, that's because it's a campaign and that's what media does. What can I tell you? I mean, the truth is, you don't call most of Republican candidates or Democratic candidates capitalist candidates. I am an independent. I mean, on the ballot, I am an independent, and in the Congress, if you look at C-SPAN, they'll say independent, one vote. That's me.
Sorry.
But philosophically, I am a democratic socialist.
Ken Thomas of AP.
Thanks, Senator. You've had large crowds at your events in Iowa and New Hampshire thus far. How are you converting them into supporters in a primary or a caucus? Are they curious to see you, or do you think these are going to be supporters for you? And secondly, what's a realistic fundraising expectation for you for the quarter ending June 30th? Do you think you can raise more than $10 million?
We are drawing very large crowds, and I am surprised by the size of the crowds. We were just in Keene, New Hampshire on Saturday, and we had, I guess, close to 1,000 people out. And I think in Iowa we've had 750 people or so out in a couple of events, which is, I understand that I may be wrong on that, are the largest crowds that any candidate has drawn. And we have a very active effort right now. One of the things I would tell you is that if I were here 6 weeks ago and we were discussing my presidential ambitions, I would not have known whether I was running for office or not. So we're, in a sense, I've only been in this race 4 or 5 weeks. We're gearing up. My campaign manager just came back from Iowa, where we did a number of hirings. He was in New Hampshire yesterday, putting together a campaign team there. So we're just bulking up right now in terms of our campaign staff. And we have we've been very active in social media. I don't want to misspeak here, but I think we have well over 200,000 Americans who have indicated they want to be part of our candidate campaign, a lot more than that actually, and 180,000 campaign contributors. So let me talk about money, and let me be very honest with you. I don't have a super PAC. I'm not going to have a super PAC. I don't want the money of the billionaire class, which is very easy for me to say, because I wouldn't get their money even if I wanted it. But one of the reasons that I hesitated about getting into this race is the money issue. We live in an obscene moment when, as a result of this disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, billionaires are now literally buying American elections and buying their candidates. And I think that is a horrible, horrible situation. And as you've heard me say, one of the litmus tests for a Supreme Court nominee that I would bring to the Senate would be a willingness to say they will overturn this Citizens United decision. But to answer your question, we are doing pretty well. We have now somewhere around 200,000 contributors at about $40 a piece. So we are going to be outspent, but for me that was never a question. The question is, could we raise the money that we needed to run a winning campaign? And I think we can. And the numbers that you talked about, $40 or $50 million through Iowa and New Hampshire is a goal I think we can achieve.
We're going to go to Andy Glass from Politico.
Following up on your last answer, what comes to mind, Senator, that you didn't know that you've learned since declaring your candidacy and going out to campaign?
That a lot of people want to make a lot of money off of campaigns. That there is an entire industry here in Washington, D.C., of folks who are prepared to help you at some extravagant fees. That's what I've learned.
Jamie Weinstein of Daily Caller.
Senator, a lot of what your opening speech was in your campaign is what America can learn from Europe. Is there anything you believe that Europe can learn from America? And also, I'm curious that if you were the nominee, whether you would consider either Hillary Clinton or Rand Paul for your vice presidential nomination.
Yes, I think there is. Look, you know, as a former mayor, what mayors look at is the concept of best practices. You know what that is. What best practices mean, I was the mayor of the city of Burlington, so you look all over the country and see what are other cities doing that are really good, and you steal those ideas, and they steal ideas from Burlington. That's what we should be doing as a world. Are we doing things better than other countries? Of course we are. There's a lot that we have to be proud of. We are an incredibly entrepreneurial nation. I mean, every other day somebody's coming up with a great idea, a great product, a great invention. We do that probably better than any other country on earth. Other countries should learn from us. But in terms of protecting and taking care of the needs of working people, we have a lot to learn from many other countries around the world. Nobody in this room should be proud that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, or more income and wealth inequality than any other major country, or that we don't provide family and medical leave, sick time, or paid vacation time. That is not the way a democratic, civilized society should operate. So to answer your question, of course, there is a lot that other countries can learn from us as well.
Jose Del Real from The Post.
Senator, so there's a sense that given Secretary Clinton's overwhelming lead in the polls, that you as a candidate are really only in this race to, push her on certain issues and to, bring attention to a lot of the causes that you have dedicated your career to. How do you respond to that idea that you're just in this race to make it?
That's a fair question, Jose, and I've heard it a lot. And let me tell you, there are candidates around this country who stand up and run what we would call an educational campaign. And I respect that. I respect people on the right, people on the left who want to use a campaign as an opportunity to get their ideas out. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, when I was a young man, David mentioned that I ran for the Senate and governor in the state of Vermont, and I did that. And nothing wrong with that. This is not an educational campaign. This is not a protest campaign. This is a campaign to win. Now, I freely admit what everybody here knows is that Secretary Clinton goes into this campaign as the heavy favorite. The polls today show her way out in front. But you know what I would also remind people is that polls have a lot to do with name recognition. I think the Secretary may well be certainly one of the best known people in the United States of America. I am not. I think our name recognition is growing. But I think if you did a poll in various states, 50, 60, 70% of the people don't even know who I am. So you're not going to get people saying, yeah, I support Bernie Sanders for president if they don't even know who I am, let alone what I stand for. But I would tell you that if you look at these very same polls, we have momentum. We have momentum. And our numbers are growing. And if we continue to work hard and effectively and talk about the issues that are meaningful to the American people, I do believe we can win this election. I am in this election to win, and that's what we intend to do.
Linda Feldman from the Monitor.
Right here. Thank you, Dave. Senator, yesterday you had an uncomfortable moment in your interview with Diane Rehm, and she's apologized for making an erroneous statement about your citizenship. So my question is, what does your Jewish heritage mean to you, and how does it inform your policy positions, if at all?
Oh, good question. I'm proud to be Jewish, not particularly religious. And what the lesson that I learned as a little kid is understanding in a very deep way what politics is about. A guy named Adolf Hitler won an election in 1932. He won an election. And 50 million people died as a result of that election in World War II, including 6 million Jews. So what I learned as a little kid is that politics is in fact very important.
Ed Henry of Fox.
Thanks, Senator. Quick two-parter. One, you were criticizing the billionaire class. Yesterday, Bill Clinton said that if Hillary Clinton's elected, he will stop taking these $500,000 speeches because it might not be appropriate if she's president. Do you think it was appropriate for him to accept that money when she was sitting Secretary of State?
You know, I have a problem. It's not Bill Clinton. I have a problem with organizations that are giving out these kinds of huge honorarium. I don't understand why they do it, and I suspect that they do it to garner favor. So I'm not enthusiastic about anybody getting those kinds of honorarium.
Okay, and then big picture on that question about the Clinton Foundation. Bill and Hillary Clinton have pointed out that they've also done a lot of good work with the foundation. But there have also been the questions about the foreign donations. Was there access? Was there influence? So my question is, does this kind of question, does it matter to voters? Should it matter to voters?
Ed, let me reverse that question if I might. You asked that question about the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers are going to spend close to $1 billion in this campaign, which is probably more money than either the Democratic or Republican parties. So if you want to go after the Clinton Foundation, that's fair, but you got to go after the Koch brothers as well. The Koch brothers, the last I heard, if somebody wants to correct me, I stand corrected. The last I heard, the Koch brothers believe, A, they get a lot of their money from fossil fuel, yes? B, the last that I understood, they want to end Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the EPA, and all campaign finance limitations. Do you think we should be looking at the impact that the Koch brothers, who will be spending more money on this campaign than either the Democratic or Republican parties, have on the political process? Let's look at all of it. That would be my answer, Ed.
Alex Thompson from The Times.
Senator, you said that you're in the election to win it. So if you do win in November, what would be the first executive action you take?
Don't know yet, Alex. Haven't thought about that yet. But this is what I do want. Let me pick up on that. My views, obviously, in this campaign, I think will be the most progressive views that maybe have been brought forth by a candidate for president of the United States in a very long time. But what also will distinguish this campaign, let me take a moment on this, Alex, because it's not really what my first executive order would be, but it is what I would do. So let me be very clear. I've said this before and I say it again. Given the power of big money and Wall Street and corporate America on what goes on in Washington, no president, not Bernie Sanders, not the best president that you could imagine, can make the changes that we need to improve life for the working families of this country. That president cannot do it alone. And I have a lot of respect and affection for Barack Obama, and agree with him on many issues, disagree with him on some. The biggest mistake that Barack Obama made, in my view, and I will not make that mistake, is that after his brilliant campaign in 2008, where he mobilized millions of people, ran one of the great campaigns in American history, essentially what he said to his supporters, thank you very much for electing me, I'll take it from here on myself. I'll sit down with John Boehner, I'll sit down with Mitch McConnell, we'll negotiate, we'll come up with some compromises. Thanks very much for what you did. I will not make that mistake, Alex. So the point that I'm making is, and this is where my campaign is very different, I believe, than any others. I do not believe that any president who's standing up for the working class of this country can be successful without a mobilized, activist, grassroots movement behind him or her. So I will be working hard to make sure that that mobilization exists. If we want to do, as I want to do, make tuition free in public colleges and universities, it will not happen with me negotiating with Mitch McConnell if he happens to be majority leader, which I hope he won't, but if he does. It will happen when 1 million young people are marching on Washington saying, we've got to join other countries. We want decent jobs, we want decent education. Same thing for minimum wage, same thing for pay equity for women workers. So if we have elections like we did last November, where 63% of the American people don't vote, then I will guarantee you nothing significant changes for working families in this country. So Alex, that's not my, in a sense, my first executive order, but that will be my first order of business, to make sure that A, during this campaign, we create that movement, and B, as president, we maintain that movement. That is the only way that I know that we bring about the change we need.
Sahil Kapoor of Bloomberg. Where are you, Sahil? There you are.
Are you working with like-minded members in the House to stop TPA from passing? I think the vote could happen as early as Friday. And what do you make of Secretary Clinton's ongoing hesitation to take a position on this?
Yeah.
Does that offend you?
Yes, it does. In this sense, look, Congress is obviously divided. My own very strong views is that when you try to understand why the middle class of this country is disappearing, trade has got to be one of the issues that you look at for an explanation. Since 2001, we have lost 60,000 factories in this country and millions of decent paying jobs. Not all of that is attributable to trade. That's true, but a lot of it is. It is no secret to anybody in this room or anybody in America that major corporation after major corporation has outsourced huge amounts of jobs, shut down plants in America. I voted against NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, and I think those were the right votes. TPP is a continuation of failed trade policies. Now, in terms of Secretary Clinton, you can be for the TPP. I think the president is dead wrong. He is for it. You can be against it. I'm against it. Elizabeth Warren is against it. Sherrod Brown is against it. A majority of the Democrats in the Senate are against it. You can be for it or against it. But I don't understand how on an issue of such huge consequence, you don't have an opinion. And, that's my view.
And are you working with members in the House?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Rosa DeLauro is doing a great job there.
Are you worried about how the fight over trade is splitting the left? There's been a lot of talk about permanent damage to the left's ability to get things done as a result of labor fighting with Obama.
No, the fight over TPP is not splitting the progressive community. Virtually the entire progressive community, every union in this country, virtually every environmental group in this country, many religious groups in this country are firmly opposed to the TPP. Why the president is for it? Well, you can ask him. This is not splitting the left. This is bringing people together, actually.
Where do you go to Ivan Caron of AFP? There you are.
Can you talk more about Europe and what you like specifically in terms of policies? For instance, are you for minimum income, 35-hour work week, 5 weeks of paid vacation?
Well, I think in general, as a result of the activities of labor governments in various countries, social democratic governments, socialist parties in Europe, workers have received more guarantees in terms of rights and security than most Americans would even dream of. So if you go, I remember this, it was a funny thing, I was in the UK a number of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, and it was an interparliamentary gathering. So members of Congress were there meeting with members of the UK Parliament. And this was just around the time of the debate over healthcare, the healthcare bill in the country. And many of the conservatives, we met with a lot of the conservatives in the UK, they were outraged what they were hearing here in America or in the American media about healthcare abroad in Europe. And the conservatives, there was no debate. If you go to the UK, nobody, go to Europe, most of the countries, nobody denies the fact that healthcare is a right for all people, virtually nobody. That is accepted. And yet in this country, despite the modest gains of the Affordable Care Act, we still have 35 million people who have no health insurance. And you have even more who are underinsured, probably including people in this room with high deductibles and high copayments. I remember I had some kids from the UK coming into my office, and I said, show me your card. And they said, we don't have a card. Just go into the doctor, say, hi, I'm Mary, this is my appointment, go in. So the fact that healthcare is a right is something that from a civilized point of view is a huge step forward. The fact that in countries in Scandinavia, they have great child care programs that are either free or almost free. We all know that if a kid gets off poorly in life, doesn't have the intellectual or emotional nourishment that he or she needs, often it's a tough journey. We've got to invest in child care. They do that all over Europe. A paid vacation, what is it, 30 days in Germany? Is that what it is? Something like that. France is 5 weeks, all right. I mean, you know, people need time off to recuperate. You can't work all of the time. I go around the country. You know what? Our people are stressed out. Do you know that? They are stressed out. They're working incredibly long hours in my state. And you know, maybe a little bit different. We're a rural state. Not uncommon to see people working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, sometimes 4 jobs. Is that where we should be as a nation? So what the Europeans have done, look, they got their problems too. They have unemployment. They have serious problems. But essentially what they have done because of, I think, the union movement and so forth, certain basic rights that when you have a baby, you can stay home and bond with your baby. I don't think that's asking too much. So yes, there is a lot to be learned by that.
Anna Mulrine in the back there.
Hi, Senator. I have a question about Iraq for you. With the U.S. military saying our latest sending of trainers in there could even be a years-long effort, and so there's a good chance you could inherit all this from our latest foray. Oh, how would you get troops out of there? Would you just kind of pull the plug and bring our troops back? How would you get them out of there?
Anna Marie, that's, you know, this is, if I had a, believe me, if I had a magic answer, I wouldn't be here. I'd be speaking to the president right now. I wish I did. Let me just say this on what is a tragedy. I voted against, when I first went to Congress in 1991, one of the very first votes I had was on the first Gulf War, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And the sentiment was to support the war. First Bush, you know, wanted it. I voted against it. And my wife, I remember my wife saying, well, your congressional career is going to be pretty short. That was your vote, you'll be out of there in 2 years. I think history will indicate that was the right vote. And certainly in terms of the war in Iraq, I did not believe what Cheney was saying. I did not believe what Rumsfeld was saying. Didn't believe the analysis that Bush was giving us. And I not only voted against that war, if you read or look at some of the speeches that I gave during that period, sadly, and I say this with no joy, much of what I feared, in fact, ended up happening. So, what do we got today? You got an incredibly destabilized region. You got a barbaric group called ISIS who is doing unspeakable things. This is an organization that has to be defeated. But this is what I believe. I believe that what's going on in that region is a struggle over the soul of Islam. And I believe that the leaders of that effort against ISIS and Al-Qaeda have got to be the nations in that region. Some of you may not know, but it's true. Saudi Arabia has the 3rd largest military budget in the world. They have a military far more powerful than ISIS. You got Turkey sitting there. You got UAE there. You got Jordan there. These are the countries that are going to have to lead the effort against ISIS. It cannot be the United States of America, because I think that doesn't work. I just don't think that a Western Christian country going in there is going to win. I fear very much the idea of perpetual warfare, that we're there forever, so our guys get killed, and we're there more and more. So I think, and you know, it's a difficult situation. I think the president is trying hard. I think you need a strong coalition of the Muslim nations and our support. But I will do everything I can to prevent us from getting into what some of my Republican colleagues, I think, are looking at as perpetual warfare in that region.
Rick Klein from ABC.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Dave. I want to ask about the Democratic debates. As you know, the Democrats put out this slate of debates, I think the number 6, and said as part of that if you participated in debates that were not part of the sanction schedule, then you'd be barred from participating in the sanction debates. What is your stance on that? Do you feel bound by it? Did the Democrats reach out to you to try to approve this on the front end? And
I'm not happy with that for 2 reasons. First of all, I think that's much too limited. And second of all, our campaign was not involved in that discussion at all. And I think what makes sense, given the fact that we are the candidates, is the candidates sit down and work out something. What I have proposed, look, I start with the assumption that there is mass alienation on the part of the American people from the political process. I mean, that's indicative when you have 63% of the people not voting, and many people not even knowing simple questions like which party controls the House or the Senate. So we have got to, I think, no matter what our political views may be, and I would hope conservatives would agree with me, that it is not a good thing for America when people are not engaged in the democratic process. And I think debates that are focused on the real issues facing the American people are a means to increase people's attentiveness and interest in the political process. So I would go further than 6. As somebody in the democratic process, this is what else I would do. I think it's a good idea to have a group of Democrats and Republicans up there. I think the Republicans, frankly, have gotten away with murder, because I think that many people really do not know what their agenda is. I'm the ranking member of the Budget Committee. Their budget includes throwing 27 million Americans off of health insurance, cutting Pell Grants over a 10-year period by $90 billion at a time when young people cannot afford college today, cutting nutrition programs for hungry kids. Let them come up. Cutting Social Security. Governor Bush, Governor Christie, among others, Governor Perry, as I understand it, are all in favor of cutting Social Security. Well, that's their point of view. I want to expand Social Security. Let's have that debate. So I think, let's break through some of the old rules and regulations. A dozen people up there, Democrats, Republicans, let's have a free flow of ideas and debates. I think that's good for American democracy. Last point that I would make on this, and I'm echoing a view that my fellow Vermonter, Howard Dean, brought forth a number of years ago. I think the Democrats have been crazy about not having a 50-state strategy. Why any major political party would abdicate competition in large parts of this country is beyond my understanding. So I would take the debates to Mississippi, take them to Alabama, take them to Utah, take them to states today that vote Republican. Plant the flag in those states. Get people excited. Present your point of view. So those are...
You don't feel bound by the 6?
Well, we're going to talk. We look forward to talking to Debbie Wasserman Schultz about these. Again, these came down from her without any involvement on my part, or I suspect other candidates as well.
Alexandra Wiltz from Reuters. You're not Alexandra. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm with Reuters, Andy Sullivan. Senator, I'd like to ask you about...
Andy, she wanted a question, and the fact that I'm an old man and can't come up with her name shouldn't be held against it. Then you're on my list.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR.
I apologize.
That's fine. Question, speaking of education, you have your tuition-free college plan. Secretary Clinton is coming out with her debt-free college plan. They're both really ambitious. How optimistic are you that the next president can do some sort of such a sweeping overhaul of the system?
I think it is time for the president, the next president, the United States Congress to start representing the interests of the American people and not just wealthy campaign contributors in Wall Street. In terms of higher education, it is hard for me to see anybody disagreeing with the basic tenet that we live in a highly competitive global economy. Nobody disagrees with that. I don't think anyone disagrees with the fact that we need the best educated workforce possible. Hard to disagree with that. And I would hope that nobody disagrees that it is a tragedy that today you got hundreds of thousands of bright and qualified young people who want to go to college but are unable to do so because of the income of their families. So we are not only taking away their ladder to the middle class and economic success, we're hurting our country. You got potential scientists and engineers and doctors and teachers and police officers and folks out there who want to contribute, and we're saying, sorry, your family doesn't have the money, you can't get a college degree. That is insane. And then on top of that, you got millions of people who are really being crushed by outrageously high student debt. Our legislation deals with both of those issues. And we do it by imposing a tax on Wall Street speculation. I believe that the overwhelming majority of the American people support it. I suspect that Wall Street does not. And so we will be testing whether or not the United States Congress works for the people of this country or for Wall Street and the big money interests. Let me just end that response by saying this. Some people think, well, Bernie Sanders' agenda is really a radical agenda. It is not a radical agenda. In virtually every instance, what I am saying is supported by a significant majority of the American people. Yes, it is not supported by the Business Roundtable or the Chamber of Commerce or Wall Street. But I am maybe old-fashioned enough to believe that Congress might want to be representing the vast majority of our people, the middle class and working families, and not just the Koch brothers and other heavy campaign contributors.
So having botched NPR, let's see what other organizations I can offend before the morning ends. We've got about 20 minutes left, and we're going to go next to David Wasserman of Cook Political Report, then Janet Hook of the Journal, Daniel Strauss, Meredith Shiner, Andrew Sullivan from Reuters, John McCormick, and Josh Topaz to end. Mr. Wasserman.
In a debate setting, what do you see as Hillary Clinton's biggest vulnerability? Is it $300,000 speeches at public universities? Is it a vote on Iraq? And what do you expect to be?
Let me just say this, and some of you have heard me say it before, and I say it again. I very much worry about how campaigns are covered, in the sense that campaigns are not baseball games. What did I read in the paper today? Governor Bush is getting a new campaign manager. You know who cares about that? About 8 people in the world. Mostly Governor Bush cares. Nobody cares about it.
And everybody in this room.
And everybody in this room. Yeah. But you know what? I was on the floor of the United States Senate yesterday, and I talked about the fact that the Economic Policy Institute recently came out with a study that said over 50% of young African American kids are unemployed or underemployed. Gets very little coverage. Which issue is more important? So what I'm suggesting is this campaign, and I mean this from my heart, that's why I'm here. This campaign is about the fact that this country faces enormously serious problems. We have got to discuss those issues. Why is the middle class of this country disappearing? Is it moral that we have massive wealth and income inequality? Are the scientists right that climate change is one of the great planetary crises that we face and that we've got to move aggressively on it? Should college education be available to all regardless of their income? Why are we the only major country on earth without a national health care program guaranteeing health care to all people? These are the questions that the American people want to hear discussed. Frankly, that is why large numbers of people are coming out. So what I would like to see in debates are serious discussions about serious issues. I like Hillary Clinton. I respect Hillary Clinton. I disagree with Hillary Clinton. I don't know Jeb Bush. I suspect I like Jeb Bush. Disagree with him. We don't have to make these campaigns personal. We don't have to eviscerate our opponents. We don't have to say that anybody who's running for office who's not me is the worst person in the world. We don't have to do that. But what we do have to do is discuss issues. We mentioned the TPP. You know my view on the TPP. I think the trade policies have been disastrous. Secretary Clinton, if she's against this, we need her to speak out right now, right now. And I don't understand how any candidate, Democrat, Republican, is not speaking out on that issue. I happen to believe that the war in Iraq was a horrible, horrible mistake. Proud that I voted on it. I'm not here to criticize the vote you cast years ago, but what does that mean in terms of your judgment on assessing information? All right? I believe that climate change is a planetary crisis. I led the effort, helped lead the effort, Sheldon Whitehouse and others, against the Keystone Pipeline, because I don't believe we should be excavating and transporting some of the dirtiest oil on Earth. What is the Secretary's position on that? I voted against the USA Patriot Act because I think we can combat the serious threat of terrorism without undermining our constitutional and privacy rights. What is the Secretary's point of view on that? I have been a leader in taking on the billionaire class, which I think is the issue of the moment. Where has the Secretary been on that? Those are issues. I respect the Secretary, but I would like to see a civil, intelligent debate. I've never run a negative ad in my life. One of the few people in Congress. I've been in a lot of campaigns. Because in Vermont, it doesn't work, and I think increasingly it doesn't work in America. People want to hear serious debates. Allow them. I'm begging the media. Allow serious debate on serious issues. Let's not get into personal attacks.
Here's a serious question from Janet Hook of the Wall Street Journal.
Senator, yesterday in New York, Mayor de Blasio said that he wasn't going to be going to the Secretary Clinton's rally tomorrow, and he's also had very favorable things to say about you. He likes what he hears from you, and I'm wondering whether you're seeking this endorsement, whether you like the endorsement, and more broadly, do you think that the outpouring of support for you when you see these big crowds reflects sort of liberal dissatisfaction with Hillary?
Let me say, first of all, I have a lot of respect for Mayor de Blasio, and I very much appreciate, in fact, I'm going to give him a ring today to thank him. I read those remarks, for his kind remarks. He has been one of the leaders in this country in talking about income and wealth inequality, which to my mind is the major issue that we face. I'm sorry, your question on that was, do I seek his endorsement?
Yeah, are you seeking his endorsement?
I'll call him. I'd love to have the endorsement of as many public figures as we can.
Daniel Strauss, Talking Points memo.
I want to go back to the REM interview. Had you heard those rumors before that you had, and then what did you think of the whole?
Well, actually, I was once at a meeting, and some guy got up there and talked about this. I didn't understand what he was talking about. Yes, I've seen it. It's been on the internet. Yes.
Where do you know where they came from? Like what? Like where? What? Just the root of it all? Sorry, I was surprised.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine.
Okay, and then what do you think about the REM interview just a day later?
Oh, what?
The Diane Rehm interview a day later.
Well, I like Diane Rehm. She is a good radio interviewer. I don't know, often I suspect what happens, her staff gives her a list of questions, and somebody screwed up pretty badly.
Meredith?
So I have a question for you both as a senator and a prospective presidential candidate. You had said earlier in response to a previous question that you don't think the perpetual war is the answer. But the AUMF is something...
But the what?
The AUMF is something that's been very complicated. Both the administration has tried to say, our lawyers say the 2001 AUMF basically protects us from needing congressional action on any sort of expansion of military engagement in the Middle East. And then you have Congress basically saying, well, the administration's lawyers say they don't need this, so it sort of gives them cover on trying to pursue a new AUMF, because there's a lot of political ramifications, obviously, for authorizing a law that might not work out. So I'm curious, one, as a senator, whether you think that Congress should act more aggressively to pursue a new AUMF. Two, if that doesn't include a sunsetting of the 2001 AUMF, whether that's even worthwhile. And three, what you would do as president.
I think the simple answer is it goes without saying that when men and women are putting their lives on the line or aren't at risk, the Congress has got to be very actively involved in that process. There's no ifs. There are, if the president sends in a special force to do something, I don't believe that needs congressional approval. But in general, I have been very supportive throughout my career to make sure that Congress is actively involved and gives approval before there's any major military activity.
And
obviously the administration...
Change my views as president in Congress is not out of the way.
President Obama ran against the war in Iraq, but has used his lawyers to sort of substantiate an expansion of engagement. So you think that as president that you should let Congress vote on a new AUMF?
I don't want to, it depends on, it's hard, you're asking a little bit of a hypothetical. Do I think that Congress needs to give approval for a special forces attack? No, I don't. But I think if there's going to be a significant engagement of ground troops, of course we could argue what the word significant means, Congress obviously has got to be involved. So in general, my view is that when you're putting lives, American lives on the line, of course Congress has got to play a very significant role.
Andy Sullivan from Reuters.
Senator, I'd like to ask you about a few of the ideas you mentioned at the top of the hour, guaranteed vacation, paid leave, that sort of thing. That would increase the cost of hiring. If you're a business and you'd like to hire 2 people, all of a sudden the cost of hiring those people goes up. You might only hire 1 person. You mentioned Europe. There's a higher structural unemployment there, in part because it's more expensive to hire people full-time. So is that a trade-off you're willing to make, that the quality of the jobs gets better, but there are few of them?
Well, I don't think it necessarily works one-to-one. Your point is a decent point. I think essentially in the last 40 years or so, the playing field in this country has been very much against working families. All right? It's not only that median family income today is $5,000 less than it was in 1999. It's that millions of people are working longer hours for low wages and so forth and so on. So anytime you make change, you're right, there are ramifications of that change. Nothing happens which is 100% positive. But I think, given the fact that the United States is the only major country on earth, only major economy, that does not have guaranteed vacation time, sick leave, or parental leave, I think we have got to address that. So yes, there may be some repercussions to that. But on the other hand, you tell me, what are the repercussions when a woman has a baby today and is forced to go back to work in a week and doesn't have the opportunity to bond? What happens to her child in her life and her father and the father's life? Is that a repercussion? What happens when today somebody in Washington, D.C. is working in McDonald's who has the flu because he can't afford to take that day off? Is there a repercussion to that in terms of illness? What happens when a family, can't spend some vacation time together? So every public policy has positives and negatives, but I think the time is long overdue for us to start addressing the needs of working families.
John McCormick, the Daily Standard.
Senator Sanders.
A little louder for the aged among us. A little louder for the aged.
Senator Sanders, going back to Iraq, do you think that a vote in favor of that war should disqualify anyone, Republican or Democrat, from being commander-in-chief? No.
Look, I think we all listened to the debate. I was on the floor during that debate. Bush and Cheney never made the case to me that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, or that a war and an invasion was the only way to resolve that issue. Other people felt differently, but everybody makes bad votes in their lives, and I don't think anyone is quote-unquote disqualified because of a bad vote.
Mr. Topaz from Politico.
Yeah, Senator, I want to press you a little bit on, you talk a lot about health care as a right, and you often talk about the modest gains of the Affordable Care Act. There's obviously a lot of blood, sweat, and tears shed over passing that law, but I'm curious if I could press you a little bit specifically on what you would actually do if you became president on the Affordable Care Act. Would you expand it in some way? Would you actually get rid of it and start from scratch? What would you actually do to make sure that health care is a right, and what does that mean for Obamacare?
Well, the end goal for me, let me say just thank you for the question. Again, looking at other countries around the world, for a start, as you know, among major industrialized countries, we are the only major country that doesn't guarantee health care as a right. I live 100 miles away from Canada. They have a system where the people feel pretty strongly about it. They like it, which guarantees health care to all of their people. In the United States today, we have 35 million uninsured and even more underinsured. Our health care outcomes in terms of longevity, infant mortality, and how we treat a variety of diseases is not necessarily better than other countries. And yet, in the midst of all that, we are spending almost almost twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other country. Is that an issue that we should take a look at? Of course we should. So the goal is to guarantee healthcare to all Americans as a right, as virtually every other major country does, and then do it in a cost-effective way. A lot of ways you can guarantee healthcare to people. Do it in a cost-effective way. The best approach to my mind, the end result would be, in my mind, a Medicare for all single-payer program administered at the statewide level. Kind of a variation of what goes on in Canada.
Last question. Sure, quick.
And you would pay for that how? With a tax increase?
Yes. Well, but here's the point. I mean, this is where, because I've been the subject of these ads. Yes, of course, taxes would go up to pay for health care, but you know what would go down? Private insurance. You would not be paying private insurance. So if I said to you, well, you're not going to pay, Blue Cross $12,000 a year, but you're going to pay $10,000 more in taxes, are you going to be crying? No, that's a positive for you. What distinguishes us, all of the healthcare systems around the world are different. They really are. Canadians, very different than the British, different than the Scandinavian model. But the one distinguishing factor in our country is that we allow private, for-profit health insurance companies to play a major role. That distinguishes us from every other country. And I think it explains why we spend so much for relatively little value.
But then specifically in terms of the future of the Affordable Care Act, obviously private insurance companies play a huge part.
Yes.
If you became president, I understand.
The effort would be to move away from the ACA toward a Medicare for all single payer. If you ask me exactly the route that we go, there are a lot of ways that you can do it. But that would be the direction that we would go.
Last question, Alan Rappaport from the Times, New York Times.
Yeah, thanks very much. Can you just talk a little bit more specifically about how much you would be raising taxes and on whom to pay for health care as well as your education plans and some of your other ideas?
We start off with the proposition, I start off with the proposition that we have massive income and wealth inequality, that 99% of all new income today goes to the top 1%, massive wealth inequality. And I just want to mention one figure which to me is mind-blowing. I don't know if it is mind-blowing to anybody else out there. In the last 2 years, Forbes magazine, a month or so ago, published this. Forbes magazine follows billionaires very closely. And what they said, this is really quite extraordinary, that in a 2-year period, the last 2 years, the wealthiest 14 people in this country, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Koch brothers, those guys, saw a $157 billion increase in their wealth in a 2-year period. That increase in wealth is more wealth than is owned by bottom 130 million Americans. That is the level of income and wealth inequality that we're looking at. Meanwhile, corporations collectively are paying a significantly smaller percentage of tax revenue than they did 50 years ago. Meanwhile, corporations are stashing their profits in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda and other tax havens, costing us $100 billion a year. Meanwhile, the effective tax rate for hedge fund managers is lower than it is for truck drivers in many cases. So what do we need to do? We essentially need to say to the top 1%, sorry, you gain the benefits of being Americans, you're going to have to accept your responsibilities. This country has a very large deficit. We have huge unmet needs in this country. And sorry, you are going to have to start paying your fair share of taxes. What I will be doing and unveiling during this campaign is a comprehensive tax plan, which will call for a speculation tax on Wall Street, which will end the loopholes that allow corporations to stash their profits in the Cayman Islands and other tax havens, which will call for a progressive individual income tax. That is something we're working on now, and I hope that in the not too distant future, we will have it out.
I want to thank you for doing this, sir. I want to thank Michael Briggs from his staff for helping us set it up. Hope you'll come back. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all very much.